And there we go.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Bored as Hell podcast. I'm Adam McDonald with Big Shiny Robot.
And I am Andy Wilson, aka Citizen Bot, also a big shiny robot.
And welcome to our final year-end wrap-up episode where we're going to talk about our favorite films of 2015. And this is also our first episode of the new year. So it should be a lot of fun. Last week we got to sit around and complain about the bad movies. I know we're both really excited to discuss our favorite films of the year. And we actually have the two of us have a different list, which I was kind of surprised about. We did promise you last time about our Star Wars deep dive spoiler episode. We're still going to do that. We just wanted to have some really close friends, like Brooke, who reviewed it with us. Our friend Brooks also wanted to hop on, and it just didn't work out tonight. So we're going to go ahead and save that for a special episode of just Star Wars that we will be bringing to you shortly. So this week we're just going to focus on, again, the best of the best. Andy, what was your number 5 film for this year?
Sure. And before I get into that, a really quick plug. I did an entire top 40 and bottom 10 list that's up at Big Shiny Robot, and that includes film, TV. So we're only covering a tiny little bit of that, and essentially, it's great that you and I have such different lists, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of your top 5 also ended up in my top 10. So I mean,
good.
This isn't like we totally disagree on a lot of things. It's a difference by degrees, and I've never seen a year where, for my top 3 at least, the difference has been so incredibly close. I think they're almost interchangeable. My number 5 to start off is Trumbo, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. This is the story of the Hollywood blacklist, the Hollywood 10.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton Trumbo, the screenwriter who was blacklisted because he was a communist and refused to cooperate with with Congress investigating the communists, and went to jail, came out, kept writing under an assumed name. It's funny. When the Academy Award nominations come out, everybody's going to get nominated in this. It's funny. It's really enlightening about what was going on then, and I think speaks a lot to, we are in a similar state of hysteria in America this year, and I hope that we can look back on that and be like, wow, that Red Scare, maybe we shouldn't have overreacted so much, and maybe we can look at all of the things around us and all of the made up things that people are trying to scare us with and be like, maybe we don't need to be so scared about that. So Trumbo, number 5.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the few movies I didn't get to see that I'm just absolutely dying to finally get out there and take a look at. But yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned we look back on like the Red Scare of the 50s and how overhyped and how sensationalized it was. Excuse me. It's kind of like there's that meme I'm sure we've all seen where you see a bunch of people, protesting, black people being able to shop at the same restaurants or drink from the same water fountains or marry a white person. And the meme says, imagine how stupid they feel now. How stupid are we going to feel 40 years from now when we're thinking about the things that we overreacted to that in the long run was just us being xenophobic and racist and afraid.
Yep. Absolutely.
So anyway, Trumbo, you liked it a lot. I really want to see it. My number 5 is Ex Machina, which is, and this was a really great year for sci-fi. I think we each have a couple sci-fi movies on our top 5. Ex Machina, though, it came out of nowhere. I had never even heard about it. In fact, this is before I got my press credentials, and I was invited as a guest to go see this with our good friend Brooks. And this movie astounded me. Like whenever you walk out of a screening, they always ask the critics and everyone, hey, what'd you think? Was it good? Was it bad? This was the one movie that I walked out and I didn't know what to say, because not only is it exceptionally written, it's very well acted. It's an incredibly, insanely, almost perfect movie. In fact, as I've watched it since I first saw it, I've liked it even more and more. It's one of the most harrowing films we've seen because this very much could be our future as far as with artificial intelligence and kind of the blurring of lines between machine and man. And as much fun as Terminator had with it, this is realistic. Like I said, fantastic performances. Alicia Vikander, she's definitely going to be up for Best Supporting Actress. She's going to have some stiff competition, which I'll talk about later. But Ex Machina, it's one of the most very subdued, subtle, and horrifying sci-fi movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, I went into this because I was like, oh, well, Oscar Isaac and Domhnall Gleeson are both going to be in Star Wars, so they are in another sci-fi movie, and Domhnall Gleeson had been in a thematically similar episode of a show called Black Mirror, which that show's just crazy. Go watch it. But anyway, and so I was really interested in this, and anything that has to do with robots, I'm always there. And this whole idea of the ethics of what we're doing and the ethics of how we will treat artificial intelligences once we create them, and then how they're going to turn around and treat us. I mean, that is, and if they are self-aware, and what does that self-awareness mean? I just loved it, and this movie has made me think for almost an entire year, and I was incredibly entertained.
Yeah, and it brought up really good questions, like if artificial intelligence does advance to the point where it can pass the Turing test, which the Turing test is, can a person be interacting with an artificial intelligence and figure out whether or not it's a real person? At that point in time, even though it's a machine, should just be afforded rights? What should, this and that? It's very, very deep, extremely well done, and like I said, it's one of the best of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy, where'd you end up with number 4?
My number 4. So my number 4 is thematically similar to my number 5, and it's Bridge of Spies. Also a Cold War movie about us overreacting to things. So I'll cop to this. I love the Cold War. I think it's not only a very interesting time period in and of itself, just the entire idea of it is really cool. That you have two giant superpowers that aren't actually fighting one another in all-out warfare. There's all of these tiny little conflicts, and in this case, we get Tom Hanks thrown into it, who's an insurance lawyer, and suddenly he's being asked to defend an accused spy. I loved this. I thought Spielberg did a great job directing it, and even more so this script, which was co-written by the Coen brothers.
Oh my God, the script is absolutely one of the best of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really punchy. It's funny at times, but the real star of all of this is Mark Rylance as the accused spy. You really feel for him, and that's not something that you would expect. It's like he's a dirty commie, and he's fighting for the Soviets on America. But the point of all of this is he's just doing a job. He's just a guy doing a job, and so how do we deal with this? How do we react to this, and get out of this mess? Very, very taut. A lot of great tension. And the movie takes us places that I certainly never expected us to go. And that final crawl where they tell you that this was the first of hundreds or thousands of cases that this lawyer was involved in. And it just blew my mind. Absolutely love this film. This was one of 4 movies I gave a perfect 10 to. And I completely stand by that. It's just that good.
Yeah, and you pretty much hit all the same points I had. It was really funny because the moment you said it was very taut and full of tension, that was literally the words running through my head when I was trying to think of how to sum it up. It was. There's a lot of movies out there that you go sit and watch, and like this, for instance, Bridge of Spies is almost 2.5 hours long.
Wow.
It doesn't feel like it though. I mean, it races by. There's not an ounce of fat on this thing. It's every scene has to be there. It brings the story forward more, or makes you understand the characters better. Tom Hanks, is great to see him back at the top of his game. I mean, even though it's been a while since he's done a Da Vinci Code, it still kind of sticks with him, I think.
Yeah.
Spielberg back doing what he does best. Little cool touches like when Tom Hanks is walking through East Berlin and gets stopped and kind of accosted by some East Berlin kids who are going to steal his jacket. I love the fact that when they're talking to him and trying to say, "Hey, give us your jacket," they didn't bother to subtitle it. So you're in the same position as Tom Hanks, where you don't understand what the hell they're saying. You're trying to guess off their pantomimes, like, are they going to rob him? Are they going to kill him? And for it all to be somewhat based on a true story, absolutely fantastic. So definitely one of my favorite of the year. It didn't reach my top 5, but it's easily my top 10.
Yeah.
So my number 4, and this was difficult to put this far down the list, so don't hate me for it, because again, it's still pretty high up there. I went with Star Wars: Force Awakens, and the reason being isn't that it's a bad movie by any means. I mean, again, this is our best of the best. I absolutely love this film. I went in and walked out feeling like a kid again. And we've been talking about it and gushing about it ever since we saw it. So it's absolutely fantastic. It's definitely needs to be part of the Star Wars universe. It definitely expands upon that and makes it better. I love it. I've gone and seen it now a couple times. I've bought books. I'm actually reading the novelization right now. I've gotten my hands on all the stuff leading up to it, the stuff coming after it. I'm 100% fully submerged back in the Star Wars universe. And it's thanks to all the wonderful work that J.J. Abrams and crew did, because it's fantastic. Even though there may be movies that I'm going to say are better films, I don't know if I've enjoyed myself more at the movies this year, aside from Star Wars.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to for me, is how much enjoyment I got out of this movie. And I thought that the technical prowess that Abrams and everyone else involved in this showed was absolutely fantastic. The fact that people are making a lot out of the practical effects that were done here, but there's a lot of CG in this movie. There's a lot of CG. Like, watch all of those digital artists who show up on there. It's really seamless though, and he knows where to make it practical and where to make it computer generated and where he can get away with what. There are a lot of places where I had a hard time telling. And I think that someone like Maz Kanata and Lupita Nyong'o's characterizations there really take it to the next level. I mean, she was a real person as far as I was concerned. And there are very few other CG characters where I've been that immersed in them. I mean, I could talk about Star Wars all day and still have more to say, and that's why we're going to go on and talk about
it. But yeah, this is one of the ones I did give a perfect 10 to. I know you did as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. Ghost. I mean, it's killing everything. At this time, it just overtook Titanic as number 2 domestically. Avatar should take out in by the time this gets on the internet, it'll probably hit that. So in 3 weeks, it's done amazingly well. I know all of us have seen it a couple of times, but yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to go see it again. And I said it's easily the most fun I've had in the theater this year.
Absolutely.
So Andy, number 3, where are we at?
My number 3 was Ex Machina, which we just got done talking about, which was not. I mean, it's a different kind of fun, and the only reason that I have this higher than Bridge of Spies was because I felt that this was very forward thinking. This is going to be one of those movies that we're going to look back on 4, 5, 10, 15 years from now and be like, that was really prophetic. Mm-hmm. That was really profound. They they captured a specific moment in time, and hopefully we will deal with those moral and ethical quandaries by that time. By that time that we actually create an artificial intelligence and have, gotten our collective crap together as humanity to be able to be moral about it. I mean, I hate to say this, but I almost hope that it takes us several hundred more years, and that it's more like a Star Trek situation where we're already like vastly evolved from where we are right now. Because I think if we created artificial intelligence right now, we would really abuse it, and we see what the effects are of that. And if you create something and then damage it like that, it's going to be a damaged thing, and you are going to reap the whirlwind, which I think is a lot of what this movie had to say about it. So let's figure out the ethics of sex with robots really quick.
They have to sign a waiver.
Did you sign your form, bro?
You get your form, bro?
Form, bro?
Oh, wrong form, bro. You can get a form for that one, bro.
South Park on my top 40 list for this.
PC for life. And actually, we do need to be careful with AI because a couple years ago, they invented a very, very minor form of AI. It was, and by nowadays standard, it's already wiped off. I mean, your PlayStation 4 is probably more powerful than this thing was. But they were asking it questions, and eventually the question they asked is like, well, what do you think we should do with all the people? And it thought for a second and said, I think we should put them all in a people zoo. So that was AI about 7 years ago. So let's be careful going forward, because Moore's law is pretty specific that this breakthrough is probably going to happen sooner rather than later. So it would behoove us to be wise and not do this typical human thing that we tend to do with new technology and think that we own it when it could very quite possibly be smarter, faster, and better than us.
Yeah. So let's get our collective crap together, humanity. Watch Ex Machina and let's talk about it.
All right. So my number 3 is Inside Out by Pixar, which we talked about, and also the basic storyline is that it takes place in a little girl's head, and it has all of her emotions: joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and is it pride? Vanity. Excuse me, vanity. And it's telling the story of why people act a certain way when bad things happen, or as people grow up, like how your perspective changes. And for me, this was Pixar at its best. I mean, we've had some good Pixar movies, we've had some okay ones, but this really takes them back to form and really sets the bar for what the best of animation can do. In fact, when we went and saw The Good Dinosaur, I actually scored it a bit lower than I probably would have had Inside Out not come out this year, because again, they've set the standard so high that even though The Good Dinosaur was a good movie, it just paled in comparison to the brilliance of Inside Out. I have friends who are like teachers and child psychologists who are like, this fully and accurately depicts what young people go through as they age, go through turmoil, go through like life changes, like moving from Minnesota to San Francisco. So it deals with all that heavy subject matter, while at the same time being absolutely joyful and fun. And of course, there's some really fun jokes that are over the heads of the kids, the adults all got. For me, I hesitate to say it's my favorite Pixar movie because there's so many just amazing ones out there. And I mean, my personal favorite is WALL-E. So I can't say that it's better than WALL-E, but I can't say that it's worse than WALL-E. If that's what I'm saying. But for me, it's one of the best movies they've ever done. I bought it the day it came out. I absolutely love it, and this definitely needs to be up there. Not only should it win Best Animated Picture, I'll be very, very surprised if this doesn't stand up and take a good race for just Best Picture overall this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This should be nominated for Best Picture, especially if the Academy continues to do that expanded slate of movies where they'll include like 10. It if this isn't in your top 10 for the year, I don't know what is wrong with you. I would like to do an Ex Machina style Turing test on you. You are not a robot. Inside Out was absolutely amazing. And going back to what you said about comparing it to The Good Dinosaur, what I came up with is The Good Dinosaur is to Inside Out what Jurassic World is to Ex Machina. It's like, yes, it's very entertaining and it's very good. It's very well done, but it doesn't have the thinks. It doesn't have the feels. And, this is guaranteed to make me cry every time we watch it with Bing Bong.
Oh yeah, Bing Bong. That we're not going to say what happens. I mean, I'm sure you can probably guess, but yeah, you couldn't guess how it happened, but that scene just absolutely just destroyed me because it was, I can't go into detail, but the way they kind of describe how the mind works and how memories work, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
The way those kind of things happen is like we'll just say things slip away.
Yeah. And, I'm so sad that this is not in my top 5, but it's just because this was such an amazing year. But Inside Out is all sorts of amazing. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so shoe in for best animated picture. If you're coming up and doing your Oscar ballots, I would be more than shocked if that didn't win, and it'll definitely be a tough front runner for best picture. But yeah, it's fantastic. I can't say enough good things about it.
Now, here's a question: if you are nominated for Best Picture, can you also be nominated for Best Animated Picture, or is it? I thought they kind of segmented it off, and you could have one. But
I think Toy Story 3 did both, didn't it?
Did it? I can't remember.
Here, I will look this up really fast while you talk to us about your second favorite movie of the year.
Yeah, because the only other thing that I'd say is that the only other animated film that even comes close to the brilliance of Inside Out is Shaun the Sheep, which I just absolutely loved. Yeah, that could maybe give it a run for best animated, but not really. My number 2 is Mad Max Fury Road. This was not something that I expected to be as gripping as it was. And then I walked into that theater and Furiosa grabbed me by the throat and didn't let me go until the end of that film.
Mm-hmm.
It's just phenomenal. I don't know how they made this movie, but it feels like literally nothing else that I have ever experienced. The characters are so well done, and especially, I mean, they could have taken the character of Nux and done nothing with him.
Oh yeah, no, he could have just been some side, and that's what you thought he was when you first see him. Like, oh, he's just going to sit there and blah blah blah, and then he just evolved and became this one of the most dynamic characters I've seen in a film in a long time.
Yeah, and he had the best story arc of anyone. It's like everybody changed a little bit. Like Max got a little bit less crazy and decided to help other people. Furiosa decided to stop running away and looking for, some other place and go back and try and fix her own problems. But Nux, he really changed, and he had a great arc, brilliantly acted by all of the actors in here. And again, blending the practical and the CG. I mean, but this was way more, 99% practical. Like,
oh yeah,
those cars, that was all there. Them doing those flips and stunts and whatever. Those were people. Those were swinging on and off that war rig all the time. And it's just absolutely amazing. And I also loved underneath it, there's this great undertone about ecological consciousness and taking care of one another and all of these other social issues that you're like, man, that's a really deep movie for a balls to the wall. It's just absolutely amazing. And again, it's a matter of centimeters between all of my top 3 movies. This, in any other year, this would be the best movie of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Mad Max is absolutely fantastic. I'll get into more detail a little bit. Spoiler alert. But yeah, you brought up the so many practical effects. And was there CGI? Yes, but the CGI was used in such a way. So there was a scene where they're zooming down, this canyon in between all these mountains around them. The only thing they used the CGI for was to CGI in the valley, instead of the fact that they were actually just driving around on flat road. But like you said, they were still driving around at 60 miles an hour, jumping off cars and doing crazy things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's absolutely wonderful, and I will get more in detail in it in a minute.
What's your number?
Okay, so it went back and forth nonstop. I mean, I was leaning one way, leaning the other way. In the end, it came down to one very minor but very specific detail, which I'll get to in a second. But my number 2 had to be The Hateful Eight. Like we mentioned last week, it's Tarantino's newest movie. It's Tarantino being subdued in a sense, because like I mentioned before, he's always done very stylized films, stylized Western, stylized World War II movies. And this was a very much classic Western with some great Agatha Christie whodunit elements thrown in. But to me, it's his best film he's ever done. It's beautifully shot, masterfully directed. Of course, it's got probably the best script of the year. I'd say tied maybe with Jobs, because I'm a huge Sorkinite. But yeah, it's just gorgeous. It's so well told. Of course, you got the over the top blood and gore, so all those gore hounds can go after that. But it tells a great story. For being 2.5, almost 3 hours, more than 3 hours, if you see the roadshow version. Again, there wasn't a moment I looked at my watch and was like, what's going on? Is this almost over? And honestly, as much as I think Alicia Vikander from Ex Machina is going to be up there for Best Supporting Actress, Jennifer Jason Leigh owns this movie. I mean, she doesn't really do much aside from get slapped in the face for the first, 2/3. But that last little couple chapters comes up, and she is in charge of everything going on. Again, Tarantino at his best. The actors at their best. The best script of the year. It's just a wonderful film, and I'm so glad that now it's finally out. People are finally able to see it, and I can finally talk about it because I haven't been able to say crap about this for over a month, and it's been a very, very exciting movie to want to talk about.
This ended up in my top 10, but not in my top 5, and I mentioned a couple of the reasons why last week. To sum up, although I'm going to walk some of it back, I felt that Tarantino still was being very Tarantino-y. I wanted to see more done with it. I said with great filmmaking power comes great filmmaking responsibility, and I wanted to see something said that was more biting, more socially conscious, or that moved film forward the same way I felt that he'd done with something like Pulp Fiction. I'm going to walk that back a little bit because as I've had time to think about this more and more, I think that the film does have something to say about slavery and the giant scar that it's left in our country. And someone referred to it as Tarantino's musing on America's original sin. And I agree with that. And so I think he's trying to do that. And not everything needs to have the the social consciousness of the other movies in my top 5.
Mhm.
I think he's great. I think Tarantino will win best screenplay because he won't have to compete against the Coens or Sorkin because they will be in the best adapted screenplay and he'll be in best original. So
Exactly. He's got that, I think, a lock set for that.
I think he's got a lock on that. I think Morricone's got a lock on best score. I think they've probably got a lock on best cinematography. I think he could be best director too. This is a film that was incredibly well directed, and he knew what he was doing. I wish he could have simplified a bit more, but I also agree that as I look back on it, there's not a lot that he could have actually cut. I think it would have had to have been done earlier in the development and scripting process before it got as convoluted as it did, because he ties a very, very tangled web with these characters, and there's not a lot of fat on that. It's just very well done. Again, if this had been any other year, this and Inside Out would have been in my top 5. Just there's too many great movies. So
yeah, and there are some scenes that I think could have been left out or shortened. One in very particular that just kind of popped to mind the moment you mentioned that was the scene when they're putting the trail out of the spikes and the rope out to the outhouse.
Yeah.
And yes, I understand it showed you how furious the blizzard was, but we kind of got that every single time the door flew open and like a whole pile of snow came flying into the haberdashery.
Yeah.
So again, there's some certain things that, while it didn't stop me from giving it a 10 because it fully deserves that, in my opinion. Just certain little things stood out, but nothing that marred the experience. But I like it when it's a bit twisty-turny and a bit complex. Not that you don't. I'm just saying that's my kind of thing. Like, I'm a huge mystery whodunit fan. So for me, trying to figure out what was going on and who was on what side and what was really happening, even though you find out within a 10-minute period. I mean, it's pretty obvious all of a sudden, like, oh, and then they kind of, like they did with the movie Clue, here's what really happened kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's that, but it's great because then that's where Sam Jackson's like, let's slow it down. Let's slow it way down. And lays out exactly what's going on and explains what's been happening. And it's like, this is really brilliant.
Yeah, so I love that. And Sam Jackson gives the best monologue / speech to Bruce Dern that I have seen in a movie in a long time. And it's very, very graphic and intense. So again, this isn't one to bring the kids to by any way, shape, or form. But it is. I loved it. It's fantastic. It flip-flopped for my best movie of the year, but it just barely didn't. I mean, it's barely missed that mark. But it's fantastic, and everyone I know who's finally gone out to see it has come back to like, oh my god, that was so amazing. So if you haven't seen it, go do it. So
yeah, just had 2 more of our friends go and see it in 70 millimeter at the Draft House tonight.
Yes, and they got to see it with the intermission, which I did not, and I'm pissed.
It's totally worth it because you need that pee break.
Yeah. So and then one quick thing before we get to our best movies of the year, I did look it up, and Toy Story 3 was nominated for Best Picture, and then also it won for Best Animated.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yes, they can do both.
They can do both. Well, that's good. We know that. I was thinking Pixar might try and have their cake and eat it too, and be like, let's make Inside Out the Best Picture nomination, and let's get The Good Dinosaur nominated for best animated. That way, they don't like split their vote.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe there's a possibility with all the Pixar voters in Best Animated, people would vote half and half for those two, and Shaun the Sheep could win, or I don't know. We'll see.
I don't. We'll see. We'll
Look,
have fun. when the noms come out and when the Razzies come out too, because Andy and I are both voting members for the Razzies. We'll have some fun time discussing that, but we shall see.
We shall see. So that'll be interesting. So my number one, this is no surprise.
Love the Coopers.
Love the Coopers. No surprise, but this was actually a very hard decision for me. It's Star Wars, obviously, but I had to sit myself down and think. And I said, what, like, I love this film. I had the best time, just like you, the best time in a theater during the entire year. Is there anything critically wrong with this film where I could take it down a notch? So I make sure that I'm not just giving in to the hype. And the more and more I thought about it, the less and less I could. Now, I've heard all of the criticism.
Yeah, unless you want to be a nitpicky SOB who hates fun, no, there's not much you can tear apart on this film.
Here's 40 plot holes. No.
Oh, you're friends with him too, huh?
There's three tiny plot holes and 37 examples of you not paying enough attention.
Yeah.
I didn't like this movie because it was too much like the original trilogy. Oh, really? Your problem with the Star Wars movie is that it's too much like Star Wars.
And you were the same one who was complaining when Episode 1 came out that it wasn't enough like Star Wars.
Exactly.
So,
last week, for those of you who are paying attention, first of all, I was lazy. I was on vacation. And I'm like, I'm just gonna, in celebration of the Beatles catalog being available on all streaming music websites, I'm going to just put on some of my favorite Beatles albums. And we had almost all of Abbey Road and about 2/3 of A Hard Day's Night. And then I ended it with Free as a Bird, which 20 years ago,
was that 20 years ago?
20 years ago.
Oh my God.
I feel so old. Oh my gosh.
I remember when that came out.
Yeah, 1995. So, here, hang on one second. Okay, my daughter just threw up. Give me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'll be back. Okay.
I'll be back in 5 minutes too. Then.
Okay.
Snap. Almost done.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Is she okay?
I think so. I seriously don't know. Yeah. She should probably be fine.
Is she sick, or did she just eat something that she didn't like, or?
I don't know. I really don't know at this point. She's just saying her stomach hurts. And yeah, I'm not going to go into it, but yeah.
No, I hope she feels better soon.
And I'm sure she'll be fine. Yeah. So,
Do you want to wrap it up tomorrow morning?
no, I want to finish this. I'm just trying to, get back in that space for a sec. Okay. I'm clearing my mind. Okay. Okay. So where I was talking about Free as a Bird.
Oh, that you ended the last episode with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where was a good stopping point. I can't.
Oh, so we mentioned it was 20 years ago it came out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so 20 years ago, they put out the Beatles Anthology Volume 1.
Mm-hmm.
And they had that old demo of John Lennon that he just left sitting there that they then turned into Free as a Bird. They went in and recorded new parts, wrote new lyrics, and when it came out the other end, nobody said, the problem with this song is it sounds too much like a Beatles song. I don't like this. It's just a cash grab on the part of Paul McCartney and George Harrison and Ringo Starr trying to get more money. And it's like there comes a point where you have to move beyond the cynicism and just say, am I going to enjoy this or am I going not to? And so that's why I included Free as a Bird, because it was a Beatles song. It sounded like a Beatles song. This was a Star Wars movie. And
Yeah.
it got us back to what made those films so great to begin with, that myth. And even George Lucas, bless his heart, for for saying oh well, I don't make movies that I've seen before. I make new and different movies. It's like, no, you kind of tried to make the same movies again. It's like there's plenty that you drew upon from the original trilogy in your prequel trilogy, and I would argue that this is very much in line with it. Maybe it's ramped up a little bit more because, hey, that's the kind of director that J.J. Abrams is. You look at what he did with Star Trek, that's very much the kind of thing he was doing, where he's trying to bridge the gap between the old and new. And I think that is what we got. And for all of the complaints that, well, this is exactly what I've seen before. No, you haven't, because you never had a female lead. You never had a black stormtrooper who crossed to the other side,
Mm-hmm.
to join the good guys. You never had a rebel pilot like Poe Dameron. You never had BB-8. You had R2-D2, but BB-8 is like miles beyond where that was. So there's so much that's different and vastly improved in this film. And that's why it's my number one, because it took that formula and it made it both new and was able to pay homage to the original in a way that felt very natural. And I don't hear people complaining when they go see a Greek play that, like, I'm tired of these people all having a tragic flaw and their hubris ultimately gets them.
And they're in love with their mothers, and
I'm tired of a deus ex machina at the end. Hello, that's what you asked for. You went to go see a Greek tragedy. I don't like it when everybody dies at the end. Too bad. That's what it's a Star Wars movie.
I was really hoping that the remake of Les Mis would have been a bit more happy at the end.
Yeah. This is a Star Wars movie. It's one of the best Star Wars movies, and I'm very pleased with it. And so ultimately, what it came down to, like I said, literally a matter of inches between Ex Machina, Mad Max Fury Road, and Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. And here's what it came down to: Ex Machina had my heart, or Ex Machina had my head.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars had my heart, and Mad Max had my it had my something else.
Had your cojones.
So I'm an amazing trifecta of films that, in my mind, are interchangeable at the number one spot. But Star Wars, just a little tiny bit more, because I think it both brought in what made Star Wars so great and also spoke to the here and now. So that's why it's my number one.
And like I said, I almost felt bad putting this as my number four. I think I made my case for the ones that came after it, and I will in a second. Because like I said before, this is the most fun I had at the movies this year. With the exception of one other movie, it's the only one I saw multiple times. Well, two other movies that I saw multiple times in theaters. And, again, I'm still looking forward to going to see it again. I'm probably, going to go see it this week. And, again, we talked about the memes at the beginning. There was one for the trailer and also one for when the movie came out, of a guy probably around our age, older, got some gray hair, he's balding, walks in the theater, and then walks out as a 10-year-old kid. And I've not had a movie experience like that. God, I don't know if I've ever had that kind of movie experience where I left in such a state of just absolute wonder and joy, and just remembering what it was like to be a kid again and be that optimistic and have just like a bright future that you were just excited for. And that was the feelings of the original Star Wars that had in me when I was growing up. And yes, does it rehash a lot of plot points of New Hope? Yeah, there's some there. It does pay, again, homage to them, and some are very, very similar. But again, it's told in a different way. It's told in a different manner, with different characters. When this was coming out, everyone was like, well, they're going to do a new cast. Are they going to bring the old cast in? What's going to happen? And they kind of did the two, but they've done a very, very good job, with the exception of one character who we'll discuss in the spoiler version, of passing that torch on from the last generation to the new generation, to where this is about the new cast. And even though the original members are still there and they're still very, very important and have major, major roles to play, again, this is in a sense Star Wars: The Next Generation. So they became their mentors, the people who are going to teach them, who are going to help them, and hopefully help them avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes they made when they were younger. But yeah, it is fantastic. I almost feel bad putting this as 4, but I absolutely loved it too. So it's still one of the best movies of the year, easily.
Yeah, well, with the rest of your top 5, it's in great company. So
yeah. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, my number one movie this year was Mad Max Fury Road, and again, the difference between it and Hateful Eight for being number 1 and 2, I literally flip-flopped about 10 times since last episode when we talked about doing this top 5. I guess what came down to it though was I went and saw Mad Max Fury Road, and I ran the emotion, every single emotion I could possibly have within this movie. It was anger, it was joy, it was fear, it was rapture, it was pity, it was, you know, envy, it was hate, it was every single thing you could possibly think of is just combined into this movie so perfectly. And yes, even though it is pretty much a 2-hour road chase, you know, the whole movie is them going after Furiosa and Max. It does it so well, and there's so much character development, and it's really funny because people have complained like, oh, well, you know, this didn't happen or that didn't happen. So I got out of this movie theater and I was hanging out with some friends the same night, and we literally sat on the kitchen table and talked about the movie and all the little cool story developments and plot twists and, you know, emotions that were said with a glance, not even with any dialogue, for longer than the movie. So we sat there for literally 3 hours, I'd say, you know, discussing that. And God, we spent 20 minutes just talking about the war boys and their religion to the V8 and why they, you know, make the symbol. And then it was funny because at work the next day, this woman came in and I mentioned I saw it, how much I liked it. And she's like, oh, I thought it was kind of boring. I'm like, how did you find it boring?
What?
She's like, well, she said there just wasn't any character development, and I kind of like movies that are a bit deeper. And she's like, but to be honest, I did kind of fall asleep. I was like, well, I don't, in all honesty, I don't know how you could possibly fall asleep in that movie. We went and saw it, and in the scene with the huge dust storm with tornadoes, Eddie almost had a seizure because it was that intense. And she's like, well, yeah, I didn't think there was any undertones or whatever. And so I then spent the next 10 minutes summing up our 30-minute discussion just on the War Boys and their religion to the V8. And at the end of it all, her mouth just dropped, and she's like, what, did you read the book? I'm like, no, there's no book. There's just the movie. And she's like, you got that from the movie? I'm like, yeah, there was so much subtext there and this and that. And, you know, I'd never seen the original Mad Max movie. That's, you know, confession time here. I've only seen this one. I own the other ones, and I'm going to go back and watch them. So I kind of went in without the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia for what came before. But she's like, oh, wow, I need to go see that again. Like, that's amazing. I can't believe I didn't notice that. But it's so well. It's a movie that stuck with me. So like, I couldn't sleep that night. I went home, lay down in bed, tried to go to sleep, and I kept on thinking about the movie. And I went to work very, very tired the next day. You know, I went and saw it again the next day and again the next day. And every single time I saw it, I saw new things, new character development popped up. The persona of Furiosa and Max, and especially Nux, like you mentioned, who I didn't even know was Nicholas Hoult until 3/4 of the way through the movie. I was like, oh, that's who that is. That's the kid from Skins and from X-Men.
Yeah.
The fact that he did such a great job acting and was so one with the character, and the makeup was so good, and the practical effects were so amazing. Cinematography, the best I've seen all year. I would be very, very surprised if it doesn't win best cinematography. There wasn't anything I would do differently, and every single time I see it, I get something new out of it. And yes, this is a dystopian future for us, which I know dystopian movies are very, very popular, but this is realistic in the sense that, you know, we fought over oil. You know, when oil runs out, what happens? We're going to fight over the water because the water's going to get poisoned or it's going to run out. And, you know, there's many paths humanity can take, and I would hope we would not choose this path because this is the worst of them. But who's not to say in 100 years from now that, you know, our great-great-grandkids aren't going to be Max and Furiosa fighting for their lives? I mean, hopefully not, but we don't know. Again, it's a perfect movie. George Miller came back, showed us that even though we've been emulating him for 30 years, he had new tricks up his sleeve. Everyone was 100% involved, 100% invested in their characters. It's magnificent. It's the best film of the year.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I certainly hope our children don't end up, our great-grandchildren don't end up in a Mad Max world. Hopefully, if they learn to treat the artificial intelligence as okay, then we can live in harmony and not poison our land and our water and end up with catastrophic climate change, and we can all live happily ever after in something more like the Star Wars universe or the Inside Out universe.
Yes.
So
but there you go. That's our top 5 of the year. I know, you know, we mentioned a couple movies. Steve Jobs would have been in my top 10. Jobs just for the acting and the script alone. You mentioned some other ones, but honestly, as many stinkers as we had this year, because there were some ones like last week we really dove into and yelled at. This was a fantastic year. I mean, it was one of the best years for sci-fi, one of the best years for spy movies. Animation took a new turn. It was a good time to be going out there and seeing well over 100 movies and then writing about them. So
yeah, amazing. And the only other ones that in my top 10 that we haven't name checked are The Martian and The Big Short. So
and The Martian was my number 6 actually. The Martian was right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. I'm excited to see what they can, where it's going to go. But yeah, that was just again this close, and you can't see this because it's a podcast. But I'm holding my fingers up really small. There were so many that were that close, and you had to make a choice, and so I'd leave them behind. But again, everyone, thank you very much. It's Andy and I. We've only been doing this for almost a year now. We got a couple months to go. We have a lot of fun doing this. Thank you very much for listening, especially those who interact with us on Facebook and Twitter. We do this because we have a passion for movies, and we hope you enjoy what we have to say. We welcome feedback. If you guys get a second, we would love for you to leave some reviews for us on iTunes. That would definitely help us, one, know what we're doing well, and also find out what we can do better. But again, thank you everyone who tunes in and who lets us know what you're liking we're doing. And again, Happy New Year. And we'll be back with our Star Wars episode, and then we'll squeak in The Revenant sometime, hopefully in the next week or so.
So do you pause for 1 second? Do you want to take a second to talk about where we came from and all that, like you were talking about on New Year's, or do you want to?
I think we've gone long enough. We should probably just, because it's been an hour, so.
Yeah, it's been an hour because I took a 20-minute break.
Oh yeah, that's right too. Well, I think that's we've talked a lot. So.
Okay, let's go. Okay, go ahead and wrap it up.
All right, hail Satan, and have a lovely afternoon.